Did you know that a single press of a button and multiple uses of the move metronome are the sole reasons why Pokemon Fire Red Leaf Green can be beaten as fast as possible? Sounds crazy, right? How can an extremely unreliable move and a single button press make that much of a difference in a Pokemon game? Well, to better understand this, we need to dive into the methods used to formulate the perfect Pokemon Fire Red Leaf Green speedrun, because the process that MK Dasher, the author of this speedrun, used to formulate such a grandiose project was insanely complicated. First off, a perfect speedrun, or what's called a task, is essentially when a human records a speedrun frame by frame in an emulator to showcase just how cool a theoretically perfect speedrun would look like, without the use of cheats or being held back by the limitations of human anatomy. When we compare the task run of 1 hour, 44 minutes, and 17 seconds to the human world record, you'll notice that there's about a 15-minute gap because of how much being perfect actually makes a difference. In order to be this perfect, a task can take quite a few months to formulate. Pokemon speedruns in particular achieve perfection through the best RNG possible. A few good examples of what this RNG looks like is critting anytime you need to KO an opponent, freezing your opponent so that they can't do anything, or even keep your Pokemon paralyzed the entire game without ever losing a single turn to the paralysis status. And for MK Dasher's journey, it all started off with this. That sound you just heard is the task pressing the L button on the title screen, which starts the entire adventure off by giving the task the best possible RNG. Before anyone assumes, this single button press isn't to activate some crazy cheat code, but instead it affects how RNG is rolled from the beginning to the very end of the game. Because unlike most Pokemon games, Fire Red Leaf Green begins the RNG seeding process through any actions you take on the title screen, since they don't have a battery to rely on like Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. But that just scratches the surface of complications, since the uniqueness of this seeding process makes controlling RNG way more complicated, even for a task. To put it simply, the quality of the seeds MK Dasher was aiming for to form the perfect speedrun required him to dig through 65,536 seeds. And even with so many seeds available to him, he only managed to find 2 that actually fit his exact needs. So what results did this seed give him exactly? Well, before we talk about those results, we need to talk about today's sponsor, Raid Shadow. Okay, wait. Before you try and click off this video, give me 60 seconds to challenge you on why we've all been wrong about Raid Shadow Legends. The biggest misconception when it comes to Raid is that it's boring and has no depth or strategy. But Raid actually has so much depth that you can literally play it for years and never end up bored. There's over 800 heroes, PvE, PvP, CVC, a ton of bosses, and even plenty of artifacts to earn in order to buff your characters. In 2023 alone, they made a massive leap in content, with the Cursed City being just one example, which is one of Raid's biggest features since the Doom Tower with 100 stages complete, including stages where you'll need to take down 2 of Raid's bosses at the same time, like this crazy dragon and spider boss at the same exact time. And I'd be lying to you all if I didn't mention that putting money into this game does help progress faster, but you don't need to put money into this game to have fun. In fact, Raid has a lot of endgame players who are dedicated to playing for free. Did I make it in time? Well, hopefully you're convinced then, because if you want to start playing today, then check out my link in the description or scan my QR code on the screen to get insane bonuses only available through my link, like 500k silver, energy and chicken, as well as the epic hero Juliana after reaching level 15, who destroys bosses like no other. While you're at it, come join my clan, the Coffee Crew, and we'll be legends together. Just hit my link in the description, and I'll see you on the battlefield. Well, it all started with a good enough Squirtle to get him to Mount Moon as fast as possible. Squirtle in particular is chosen because it's simply the best starter Pokemon to use for all portions of the game, with its amazing coverage and fast access to water-type moves. Bulbasaur and Charmander unfortunately take ages to get off the ground to even consider. One of the bigger factors in this seed is the fact that it only has 2 forced encounters going from Pallet Town to Pewter City. Normally, this wouldn't be an issue for any Pokemon game, but even a task that has complete control of the game on a frame-by-frame basis is bound to the limitations of the Fire Red Leaf Green encounter system. The way that the encounter system works is by forcing what I call the 789 roll, because the first first 7 steps on route grass, 8 steps on forest grass, and 9 steps in cave dirt have a 1% chance of encountering a Pokemon. And each step that you take after those 1% encounter steps will increase the odds of getting an encounter by a set amount until it's literally impossible to not get an encounter, which forces even a tool-assisted speedrun that has frame-by-frame control of a game to buy repels. But that's okay, since the seed at least gets us to where we need to be before repels are necessary. Because with only Tackle, Bubble, and Water Gun to its name, Squirtle will obliterate every single trainer from Pallet Town to Mount Moon super fast with plus special attack nature, perfect special attack IV, and ability Torrent. Then once a task enters Mount Moon, it'll be avoiding every single optional trainer, grab a Moonstone, then drop its repel just in time for a brand new main, Clefairy, to appear. The moves Clefairy comes with are not very impressive at all, but luckily it makes up for it with incredible IVs and the fact that fairy typing doesn't actually exist in Generation 3 Pokemon games. This means that Clefable will be a normal type Pokemon, which gives it access to a normal type same type attack bonus. And even though Clefable will have a much better special attack stat throughout the entire game, all normal type moves being a physical attack in Generation 3 means that prioritizing physical attack stats is much more beneficial than special attack stat. This normal type boost is actually so good that it can use underpowered moves like Pound to great effect, crushing the final 2 Mount Moon trainers standing in the way of Clefable getting access to Mega Punch and Mega Kick. While human speedrunners might not be too familiar with Clefable due to how hard manipulating one actually is, they are definitely quite familiar with the extreme and unreliable accuracy of Mega Kick and Mega Punch. And to put these moves on a Pokemon that gains a same type attack bonus on them is like giving Thanos all of the Infinity Stones without a fight. However, this power isn't the only reason why Clefable outshines Squirtle and even its evolutions. First off, Clefable saves a decent chunk of time on Squirtle, Wartortle, and Blastoise due to it having a super short cry. Not only this, but Clefable has a way better EXP curve, which will earn it more level ups to a certain point compared to Squirtle's evolutionary line. And by the time Squirtle can even evolve to Blastoise, Clefable ends up being way too far ahead for Blastoise to even catch up. How does it get that far ahead exactly? Well, to start, Clefable begins its rampage inside of Cerulean Gym before heading to Nugget Bridge. Misty, Staryu, and Starmie can be one-shot by Clefable's punch and kick thanks to some well-timed critical hits. After the gym battle is done, Clefable will then receive the only coverage move it needs to beat the game with besides Metronome, the Water Pulse TM from Misty. Water Pulse will let Clefable KO Rock-type Pokemon with ease and help us avoid any problems Clefable would normally have trying to hit Ghost-type Pokemon. And with this newfound power, Clefable can one-shot all of your rivals' Pokemon and the entirety of Nugget Bridge to gain access to a wild Abra. Catching an Abra here saves time from having to travel to Cerulean City multiple times. The first time will be after saving Bill from becoming a Pokemon, while the second time comes after you completed every task in Vermilion City, which comes down to one-shotting every Pokemon from the SSN, Vermilion Gym, and Rock Tunnel, with emphasis on these really small micromanagements that end up adding up to be a lot of time saved. Like how the task will swap a move to the front of its move pool before teaching a new move to save time on scrolling, use Pound over Mega Punch or Kick when possible to save time on text, and even getting off the bike before loading in a new area if the bike music is playing. This is due to bike music causing lag when you try to transition to an area with a fresh loading zone. A good example of this coming into play is inside of the Safari Zone, where the task will get off its bike constantly before entering the next area. This actually saves so much time that the task ends up even running towards and picking up an item in the final area to avoid lagging because of the item ball jingle. But everything that I've said so far doesn't even compare to the amount of time that we save from Clefable never needing to buy or use X items to clear the game, and is one of the biggest reasons why Blastoise falls short compared to Clefable, considering the amount of time it takes to go in and out of the massive Celadon Mart. And speaking of Celadon, this city is actually the final spot where the task faces a threat that can actually outspeed it, which is Giovanni's Kangaskhan. Not that the Kangaskhan's much of an issue since Mega Kick one-shots it with a crit, but it's really interesting to see just how well these stats on Clefable line up for just about every situation. Now, the order of operations from here will be to beat up Lavender Tower, Celadon Gym, then head towards Fuchsia City Safari Zone for 3 important items: the HM for Surf, the Gold Teeth to trade for Strength, and the Quick Claw item just in time for the faster threats to show up. because even though we have a really good EXP curve, we're getting to the point in the game where Pokemon are starting to match Clefable's level, making it extremely viable for us to grab the Quick Claw item. The really interesting quirk about the Quick Claw item is that it not only gives you a 20% chance to outspeed every opponent, but it also gets a bump up to 60% when you're speed tying an opponent in this game. And thanks to the ability that a task has to time every single input, it'll let us outspeed and one-shot everything in Koga's gym and Blaine's gym before we take a small detour. You see, inside of the Cinnabar Science Lab is where we'll finally be able to learn the move Metronome. Metronome is a move that can pull from a total of 339 Pokemon moves. And given the task's ability to manipulate the outcome of pretty much everything else, it's also given the ability to choose whatever move it needs to in order to fit any situation. But here's the catch. Using Metronome is actually incredibly slow compared to other moves thanks to how long it takes for the move to go off, making it so that using it needs to be absolutely necessary. Clefable will not be touching it for a while since it can one-shot literally every Pokemon from Silphco, Sabrina's gym, Giovanni's gym, and finally, your Victory Road rival with almost exclusively normal type moves, which only leaves the Elite Four left, where we'll be saving a total of 12 entire turns by using the move Metronome. Under almost every circumstance, a speedrunner would normally deposit all of their party members to save time on the Hall of Fame registration before entering the Elite Four. But it turns out that manipulating a good enough metronome move is extremely difficult, and Lorelei is likely the entire reason why this is the case. The battle against Lorelei starts by critting her Dugong with a clean Oko Mega Kick. The next three Pokemon, Cloyster, Slowbro, and Lapras, will need a very specific set of moves in order to be KO'd in one hit. Since Cloyster is packing an incredibly high defense along with the ability Shell Armor to stop critical hits, MK Dasher was only able to find 3 moves that could KO it. Weirdly enough, those same 3 moves happen to also take out Slowbro, but this time it needs an added critical hits due to Slowbro's bulk. And finally, the only move out of 339 of them that was realistically able to one-shot Lapras thanks to its weight is Low Kick. While Metronome does have the ability to call upon Fissure, Guillotine, Horn Drill, and Sheer Cold, the problem with rolling these moves on the metronome table is that the accuracy is much harder to manipulate than just getting a KO with a single move. And it's very likely that MK Dasher was not able to find a metronome roll where these Oko moves actually hit, combined with also depositing his Pokemon. He did re-record this entire task a total of 97,975 times to get the perfect RNG after all. But we're not done just yet, because the metronomes don't just stop there. Well, they do on Bruno since his Pokemon just died to critical hit stab moves and non-crit water pulses. Agatha and Lance, however, are a completely different story. Both trainers have Mons that Clefable's moveset just can't handle. So the task will need to spam Metronome 3 times on Agatha and 2 times on Lance, and to end it all off with a bang, the champion fight starts by critting Pidgeot and Alakazam with normal type moves, followed by a non-crit water pulse on Rhydon. Gyarados, Arcanine, and Venusaur are very special cases. Gyarados only dies to 5 moves, and Arcanine dies to only 6 moves, all of which need a critical hit. His final Pokemon, Venusaur, however, is the most beautiful send-off to any task that I've ever seen. You remember that 31 IV attack with a plus attack nature that Clefable has? Well, if it wasn't for the absolutely maximized amount of attack that you can get on Clefable, you wouldn't be able to one-hit KO Venusaur with a Mega Kick without it. And even then, it is a 2 out of 256 chance to roll a high enough damage roll to achieve this KO, making each one of Clefable's moves, stats, and time that it shows up just as important as the last, saving a total of 15 minutes over the human speedrun, as well as 2 minutes and 5 seconds saved on the previous task that only used Squirtle. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed, and don't forget to check out the sponsor Raid Shadow Legends in the description or through this QR code.